Hello and welcome back to Danish Lessons with the Missing N. This video is not really a Danish lesson, but just a more general lesson on languages in general and learning languages and advice and a warning, I guess. So I want to start with an anecdote. This is something that truly happened to me when I was learning French in school with a lot of other, not necessarily Danish kids. There was an English kid in particular, an English guy who was pretty good at French by this point, but then at one point he was explaining something and he suddenly said this phrase here, "Il est sur ses propres." Now, you may or may not know French, but it doesn't really matter because even if you don't, this phrase doesn't mean anything in French. And no one, not the teacher, no one understood what he was trying to say. He is, sure, but then this bit here is not something you can, these words mean something individually, but you can't have them next to each other in French. It just does not make sense. And it took a couple of minutes and he was trying to explain himself and he just kept repeating this until suddenly he gave up and exclaimed, burst out to the rest of the class in English. He asked his fellow students, "Guys, how do you say on his own?" That is what he was trying to say. He is on his own, and the words he used were the correct words in English. He had taken every word in English and translated it to French, which gave a nonsensical phrase in French. And that is sort of the warning I want to give here. There is a certain danger in always thinking in your own language and then trying to translate that into the language you're thinking. And specifically, there is a danger in trying to find for every single word the word in your native language that fits that, because it's a very self-centered view in a way, the view that your language is somehow the defining language and that every other language will be expressible in your language. The reason I'm bringing this up now is because I just made videos on these two words and I tried to find an English translation for it, and as I was doing it I was thinking, well, it's really not easy to find a good English word for this. And more importantly, I don't want to give an English word for this, and obviously there's this one that's kind of tied to it as well. Because these have meanings in Danish, and I want you to understand those meanings, and I'd like to kind of tie together how it all fits together and get a feel for how they fit into sentences and the general purpose that they serve without having to tie it to an English word. If I may give an example maybe which applies to myself, which hopefully you can understand, let's say, how big, just that phrase, you want to describe how big something is in English, and I'm focusing here on this word, how, because how in English means the method or the procedure, like on its own, that is what how means. How did you do it? What method, what procedure did you use in order to accomplish this? But when you say how big, you're saying, are we talking about this kind of big, or are we talking about this kind of big? So you're describing this. What is the importance of big in this sentence? And that is what the how does. So it's completely different from this one. And I bring this up because this word here exists in Danish as well, but we use the word that we also use for where. So in Danish you'd say where big, and that's kind of the how important is big in the sentence. I said how important, and that defeats the point of what I'm trying to say. What I am trying to say is when I speak English, I'm Danish, I'll remind you, and when I speak English and I want to say how big, I don't first think where big, and then I think, oh, but there is this rule in English that instead of saying where big, I have to translate the where into how and then say how big, and then out of my mouth comes how big. No, I've seen this so many times that I understand that this is kind of a structure on its own, and the word, that is just what the word how does. The word how covers this and it covers that. And that is the point I want to make. So that this, I don't want you to think of it as the, I mean, if it helps, sure, but I don't want you to think of it as the was it. I want you to see it long enough that you sort of understand what it means. And more generally, this applies to other words as well. I don't want to have to give English translations for every word I show you. I will sometimes do that to help things for you, but in most cases I will do my best to also explain what they mean and how they are used, so that you will just understand how they're used in a sentence rather than having to translate it from English. Just to be clear, I'm not saying this is easy. I'm not saying this will just, once I've told you this, oh, it will all be so easy for you. No, it's a very hard thing, and the only way to get a true feeling for it, the only way to think in a foreign language is through tons and tons of training and practice and reading a lot. So it will not come immediately, and there is nothing wrong with taking shortcuts when you're learning a language and finding the words that fit in your own language. For example, I'll give you one. Det in Danish has a very good English translation where this covers a lot of words that actually happen to coincide pretty well with the words that this covers. But really, as I've already said, the point I'm trying to make is that there's no point in, when you're trying to learn a foreign language, to sticking to the language you already know and trying to phrase everything in that old language. Languages do things in different ways, and in order to truly learn a language, you need to accept that words will have several meanings and words will act in different ways. And if you get a general feel for what the words do, then you're in a much better position to learn the language. I'm blabbering here, but I hope this all made sense and that I kind of got the message across. That will be all for this time. I hope you learned something. Thank you for watching.